Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is 4 o'clock. And here's our chair. I thought you were late. I'll turn it back over to you then. Okay, welcome to our December 2nd, 2025 Ogden City Council meeting work session. Let the record reflect that all council members are present with the exceptions of Councilmember Blair, who we expect to be arriving shortly. You want to take it yet? Okay. So first thing on our agenda is to review the city council meeting. As you can see, it's not a long agenda. Anybody have any questions about any of that?
I do have some questions about the Ogden School District surplus property. Do we have any more information about the decision that was made, or do you want to?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Is there going to be a presentation in the meeting?
We might have to circle back around. I think.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I just was curious.
I agree. I
think
think
there's a presentation, or
yes.
like what?
Yeah. So after talking to quite a few of you, or today, it sounds like there might be some comments that need to be made, and therefore, I think we should probably pull this off the consent agenda so that we can have an opportunity to vote individually. Does that sound okay for you guys if you want to do that? Meaning you'll be able to make comment? Is that okay? Yep. All right.
Should we just explain the procedures? My understanding, and I could be wrong, but at least at the Planning Commission, if an item on the consent agenda doesn't get unanimous vote, it is no longer a consent item and needs to be pulled anyway. So that's kind of the thinking.
I guess that's what I was just curious. I mean, we wouldn't normally have a presentation on the consent item, right? So.
But we do have Jeremy Smith does have a presentation ready. He's just not here now. So maybe we can just have him give it in the meeting rather than the work session. Or do you want him to do it here too?
It doesn't matter to me, I think, but.
He's planned to come here.
Mm-hmm.
I just assume get it here first.
Yeah.
If he's planning to come here and we're planning on that, I just assume hear it here for the first time.
Maybe somebody from administration can follow up and find him. Okay. All right. Well, then let's move on, just because we have quite a bit of to deal with. Other than that, it is a very short agenda, and then we'll go into a closed session after that. It's pretty. We're looking at trying to get back into the closed session around 6:30. So trying to get out of there by maybe 6:25. So
we do have a contingency plan if the meeting goes long.
All right, great. All right, well.
Thank you, Ginny.
Thanks for thinking through that. All right, with that, let's, you guys want to?
Yoda.
I don't know, it just says Kenny's coming up, but do you want to move to the agenda item on the work session, and then we'll go back to what Jeremy has. So it just says Kenny, so.
Kenny Miller.
But
we'll
Kenny
bring
Miller.
the
Chief up as well.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm going to get out of your way, I promise. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the council for all the support. And I know as we move forward into a new year, this will be a different council. So Chief Miller has got our pre-disaster mitigation plan, and he'll do a great job in this presentation. But I just wanted to extend on behalf of the fire department our thanks to Janine, Councilmember White, Choburka, and Blair for all their service they provided over the years. It's been refreshing coming up through the ranks to have such support of the council. And so probably not appropriate, but I wanted to stand up and thank you all for your service. And then I will turn the time over to Kenny for the pre-disaster mitigation plan. So thank you.
So today I'm here to present on the Weber County pre-disaster mitigation plan. We've worked over the last few years, when I say we, all the cities in the county, plus the county emergency managers, to get this plan together. And basically what it's what it's for is pre-disaster mitigation. Just get right into it. So the executive summary basically just kind of states right off the get-go, hazard mitigation involves any sustained action to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to human life and property from hazards. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but what we do is we look at all the hazards we have within the county. Me specifically, I look for the hazards that we have here within the city. I worked extensively with our engineering department, public works department. I'm trying to figure out what issues we may have throughout the city to, if a disaster hits, where it's gonna affect us the most. So I got a lot of input at the time from Justin Anderson before he moved up into a position, then worked a lot with Taylor Nelson before he moved up in position, then with other folks in public works, specifically Vince Ramos, trying to figure out kind of what issues we have there within the city. And then right here is an adoption letter from FEMA that was also sent to the state Department of Emergency Management. Once we get our plans in place, we have to send them to the state. They have to go through it. They send it back to us if they have any discrepancies, any questions on issues, or if we're missing anything. And then once it gets approved from the state, they send it to FEMA. FEMA has the final approval of this plan as it all correlates and relates to basically federal funding from FEMA. Here in the letter, it states that it's a 5-year plan, and in it, if we want to apply or receive any sort of federal funding for mitigation or pre-disaster mitigation things, we have to have this plan in place. So they're the final say, and they have to approve it. Like I was saying, it's a 5-year plan, and here, so it was approved at the end of 24. No, the start of 25. And so it'll last till 30 for us. If we want to do any additional changes, we have to get approval again. But before 2030, we have to have an approved plan in place again that will replace this one. Any questions so far? No. Local jurisdictions need to participate and adopt the PDM, the pre-disaster mitigation plan, to be eligible for mitigation project grant funding. So that's the reason why I'm here, is to discuss this plan, just so we can get approval and we can get this plan adopted, so it's our working document for the next 5 years. Here's just the list of the 14 hazards that are addressed in this plan. As you can see by reading some of those, a few of these are some of the issues that we've dealt with in the last 5 years. From droughts, kind of always a big one because it affects the entire county and statewide, usually with water issues. Big ones that we've dealt with have been thunderstorms, windstorms, extreme weather events, and then the flooding in 23. So these are just a few. These are the 14 hazards that are most applicable to the county. And then, as we can all remember, there's a few that we've dealt with here in the city. And so this right here, I've just pulled a few of the some of the actions that we want to address, or we have in mind to address in the future. These are just a few of the things that we're currently working on, like the ineffective dipstones throughout the city. Those tie into the stormwater, and then the slip line of the sanitary sewer lines. Some of the bigger projects on here are going to require federal funding on our part, just because they're giant projects that we need help to accomplish over the next few years. And just because we have them here in our plan doesn't mean that they have to necessarily be done. This is kind of like what we're currently working on, what we want to work on, and our wish list of what we could work on if we got the funding. One of the big ones on here is the replacement of the Ogden Canyon, replace the Ogden Canyon water infrastructure. It's a big, huge project, and the city's done a good job of putting money away, doing these CIP projects to start a lot of these funding things, these funding items, so we can start the replacement on that. And then the other ones are the water tank up in 46, replace that. Things that we want to have in motion, so when the disaster does happen, we're ready to go. Questions on any of that? And then the goal here is we can raise protect life and property by prioritizing actions that reduce risk to the critical infrastructure in the community. Basically, the goal of it is what's in the title. It's pre-disaster mitigation. If we can spend $1 towards preventing, not preventing a disaster, but preventing a disaster of ruining something. Let's see, how does it go? It's if we spend $1, it accumulates to $5 in previous funding. So if we spend $1 now, or if we don't spend the $1 now, if we have a disaster and it tears something out that we need, it's going to take $5 to replace that. So the more money we can spend up front, the better off we're going to be and help protect property and lives. And then there was, I don't know if any of you guys were, when you looked at it, Janine was able to catch this, but in our acknowledgement page, it didn't have the city of Ogden on there. It was just, there was a few cities that were skipped with just happenstance. You know, they said North Ogden, then would just forget Ogden. So we got a hold of our contractor that put together this for us. And basically it's been fixed. I haven't sent out the new link to everybody. If you guys would like that to see that it's been fixed, I do have it, but I have it downloaded. If we do adopt this plan, then it will be submitted to the recorder's office, the new updated plan that says acknowledgement for Ogden City that basically participated in the project or in the plan and gave some informations. That's all I have. Down and dirty. Any questions, anybody?
I have a question. Surprise, surprise, huh? This is kind of science fiction a little bit, but I understand it is a real threat. Electromagnetic pulses. It wasn't one of the things I saw on your list, but you did kind of address, hardening infrastructure. And
Yeah.
that is that been discussed or?
It's not a direct threat that we would say that is bound to happen. Is it a threat? Absolutely. There's a lot of threats out there that we didn't address in this because they could be so vague, so random, or one-offs. A big thing on here, or a big thing that wasn't addressed on there that kind of is a hot topic right now is space weather. People don't think like, what is this space weather? Well, a couple of weeks ago, we were seeing the northern lights. Like, how often does that happen? Well, it's because of solar flares. Those solar flares can affect stuff. A lot of our infrastructure that we have doesn't tie directly to that per se, other than our IT things. It's more of a private sector, hardening the power grids and things like that. However, we do have things in the city that we do need to take safeguards towards if we do have these electromagnetic pulses or solar flares or things like that. But it's not to say it's not going to happen, but it's something that we don't is our hazard vulnerability analysis or HVA study doesn't have that as a top priority. The top priorities are, flooding, earthquake, extreme weather, things like that. So it's not something that's 100% on our radar that we have to address today immediately. If that makes sense, if I'm not muddying it a little bit more.
Well, I kind of bring it up just because, it is a little science fiction-y, but I understand it is, it could be a real problem if it happened. And, after the fact, you can't fix it after the fact because it's done. But.
Correct. And that's one of the things that we talk about in our EOC committees with IT and things like that. We have a few backups and fail safes for things like that, but you can't plan for everything.
Right.
But we do the best to try to plan for everything, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm waiting for this.
Yeah, so one of the things that we can do is we know we can operate our system manually. Now, what we would lose control of is kind of our SCADA system. So we would lose necessarily knowing exactly how full the tank is at any given time or what our PRVs are pushing pressure, but we can still operate our entire system manually. Now, we would lose maybe some SCADA controls on one sewer pump station. So that means we would just have to manually go and visually look at that because we wouldn't have an alarm hooked onto it. But the entire system, we are ready with our standard operating procedures to run manually in case that happens.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
I have a question,
Yeah.
Chair, if that's all right. And then sorry, I missed the presentation, just was finishing up some things. So if you already answered this, Going through the packet, there was a section that said that the plan includes formally incorporating the mitigation actions into the city's annual budget cycle and capital improvement plan to ensure sustained progress towards resilience. And so I don't know if you address what is the
So-
budget impact?
Yeah, so to adopt this, there's no budget impact currently. Some of the language in this is put in there because of FEMA.
Okay.
So like I was saying before, this for us is projects that we're working on, projects that are on our radar, and then also kind of a wish list of projects that we want to see done. Just because they're in this plan doesn't mean that we have to do them as a city. Is it in our best interest to do them? Absolutely. But a lot of it is going to rely on federal funding and things. When we first started doing this, I think when I was talking with Taylor, he mentioned that one of the projects we want to do is, $70 million. That's a big hit for a city. That's a lot of money. So if we can get federal funding to help with these projects,
Right.
the whole lot easier. When we first were doing this, we were working with, I was working with Sunrise Engineering with the water department to put in for a BRIC grant, which is a building resilient infrastructure or building resilient infrastructure and communities. And so that's one of the grants that we would like to approve or apply for. They're very in-depth. They go through a national selection. The first year I was in the Office of Emergency Management, I was on that selection committee, reading these grants 8 hours a day, trying to figure out their scores and if they hit enough points to qualify for it. So it's very competitive. Unfortunately, this year, our federal government got rid of the BRIC grant program. So we were banking on having this plan done before the time frame came to apply for the BRIC grant. We got the plan in place, then the BRIC grants went away. Not to say that they're not going to come back in the future, not to say other funding is going to come back in the future. It's best to have this plan in place so when funding does come available, we're able to tap into that, or we're going to be ready to tap into that.
Sounds good.
There are some horror stories about these plans of communities not having them in place, where when they do have a disaster and they declare a disaster, they either don't get or slow to get federal funding to help with the disaster because they didn't have their plan and they weren't prepared for it.
I
So,
see.
if that makes sense.
As a follow-up to that, is there a possibility that FEMA comes and says, you have to do this because you adopted this plan and require the city to implement something is there anything in there that does that?
There's nothing in that we've ever been told or we've ever been seen that says just because it's in the plan, you have to have it done.
Okay.
When we build these plans, like, so in this plan, for one of the projects, it states, what is your timeline? And they don't want, they don't want like an undetermined or whatever. It's like within the next 10 years. Well, if it doesn't happen within the next 10 years, then it can be on our plan for the next 10 years or so on and so forth. Just, we've always been told just because it's in here doesn't mean it has to be done.
Okay.
So we put projects in there that we're currently working on because you never know when funding is going to come available. Say, hey, we want to help cities with their stormwater. Do you guys have any plans with your stormwater? Well, absolutely we do right here in our pre-disaster. And so we can tap into those funds.
Perfect.
So it's not all big ticket items, but we put big ticket items in there so we can apply for the funding when it does come available.
Thank you. And sorry if you already covered that.
Oh, nope, you're good.
So I've got one, and it's a new state law that's going to kick in January 26th, so a month away. And this is the wildland urban interface.
Correct.
And there's two components to this, and it's murky as far as I'm concerned around getting information. I've been not lucky finding resources, and it's going to land on our residents. One is mitigation of your property, harden it against embers and fire and that sort of thing. And the other one is fees. And do you have any insight, Kenny, into what kind of fees are going to be assessed and who we're going to be able to go to as property owners to assess the property and point out some actions that can be taken to mitigate?
I'll turn the time over to Chief Slater because that's our fire prevention division. They deal mainly in that. I know about it, but I'm not in detail.
Okay. So I just, because it was wildfires was one of your
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. House Bill 48 actually took effect this year. The state doesn't really understand how they're going to assess the fees. They've leaned in and asked for county and city help to go evaluate these properties. As a fire department, we're going to choose not to do that. Our resources can be better spent elsewhere. So that is going to affect. And so they're developing a map. The state forest and state lands is developing a map right now that will tell you if your home is in that WUI area, that wildland urban interface. They will come and do an assessment on your home. And if your home's hardened, if it has heat resistant paint, if it has non-flammable shingles, then they can recommend to you whether or not you're insurable or not through your insurance company. It's a long bill that has a lot of impact that us as a city doesn't have a lot of say in. So we were proactive, and what we've done through the help of Josh Jones and ArcGIS is we've developed a wildland urban interface plan. It's still in the works. We developed the wildland urban interface area throughout the city. We currently have it on a map that we're working on. And we have a strategic plan to reduce the WUI area in Ogden City by 10% over the next 3 years. So the first step was to get our own internal map developed. So we have that map. The second step is to have the state lands, the federal lands, and then the private property boundaries on this map. Once it's on that map, then we will do a sandbox modeling with the state of Utah to determine which areas in Ogden City are more prone than others for wildland fires. And we're going to start mitigation projects. So we have a plan to thin some of the vegetation, to plant fire resistive natural plants in these areas. And so we have a plan in place, I guess what I'm trying to say. House Bill 48, when it came out, they kind of put the cart before the horse. And so they will hit our community, they will assess fees. We plan on January, February, having some town halls to talk about this with our residents. I know the state has done that. I think we can do a better job explaining how that impacts Ogden City proper. But we do have a wildland and urban interface plan together to reduce that by 10% over the next 3 years.
Thanks for that, Mike. I'm glad that the city's aware of what's going on, and we'll have some information to impart upon or to our residents. You know, I called my insurance agent at State Farm, and he said, we're aware of it. You're going to be fine. State Farm is not chattering about dropping policies. Others are. And he rattled off a number of them. So we've got people up here that are being impacted by the state law now in a negative way because their insurance companies are dropping their homeowners policies.
Yeah, and unfortunately, after the Palisades fire, a lot of insurance companies have done that. And I'll be honest, some of the drops aren't even in wildland urban interest areas. It's just an excuse for them to drop coverage. I do know that there's a handful of insurance agencies out there that are still insuring people, but as far as the city goes and the fire department, we've got to be proactive on thinning some fuels. The home-to-home spread in the Palisades was a big issue.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something we've got to address as a city, whether we harden homes, whether we clear ladder fuels, whether we do something to prevent an ember cast. That's all stuff that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Our team's relatively new. We've had kind of a big turnover in the last couple of months, and but they're hitting the ground running. And so we've got a plan in place. We're just developing it, and we will share that with council once it's done, and start having some town halls with the community to help them.
Because the book of the subject is open, I will recall Fire Marshal Brown saying, you know, you need 3 things for a fire, and it's oxygen, it's fuel, and it's ignition. And we can't control fully oxygen or fuel, but we can control ignition. And can we get rid of fireworks? Please.
Yes,
Everywhere in the city, they go in the air. They don't belong here.
Yeah, it will be another hot topic down at the state capitol again this year. And it is every year. And so we do what we can with the restrictions that we put in place for the city to help with the ignition source. I think we can honestly do more.
Yeah, you're constrained by the state law to, you know, outlaw them in particular areas, but.
And a lot of it is we just got to work in collaboration with some of these firework companies. And I mean, I'm not a firework fan. I'll just say it, but they do have a lot of lobbying power. And when something becomes law, it takes it out of our hands. But I think we work in collaboration with some of these companies at the state level. I think we'll have some success. We're pushing.
You got
We're
my
pushing.
2 cents. Thanks,
Yeah.
Mike.
And then, Councilmember Graff, just to let you know, one of the things that I did actually have up on that slide was we want to increase our infrastructure with hydrant system and piping up in the urban, the WUI area, the wildland urban interface area. And I know Public Works that's a priority for them. And so that is one of the things that we want to take care of. So if we ever do have a major fire up there, we will have the water coverage, the pressures that we will need up there to suppress those fires.
Thanks.
So.
Good to know.
I have another question, if I could, please. As I've studied through this, and I understand that this is kind of collaboration with Weber County and many other entities,
Correct.
how is the priority received or planned on what are priorities in these funding areas that you're requesting through FEMA? Is that something that Weber County controls?
Our stuff is not ranked. So out of the whole 1,200 page document, there's probably 10 to 15 pages in there that pertain to Ogden City. Everything else is the special districts, all the other cities, the unincorporated part of the county. They don't ask when we submit this information to them. They don't ask for a ranked list. They just ask for projects that you're currently doing, that you've done prior to from the last mitigation, the pre-disaster mitigation plan, and then what you'd like to see done in the future. And they're basically just all spelled out as of, we'll just say, a list of things we want to get done when funding is available, if that makes sense. If we have a big ticket, $70, $100 million project, and we just can't do that on our own, and then funding comes available through grants, federal funding, or whatever it may be, we can apply for those saying, look, we've addressed this. We know it's a problem for us. We want to fix it. This will benefit our citizens, will benefit our community, will benefit the infrastructure completely. Can we get some money to help with this project? And then this shows that we've had the foresight to look forward to say, hey, these are things that are going to affect us in the future. These are things that may become a problem with us. So when funding is available, we want to address these certain items.
Thank you. Can you give me an example of some of the funding grants that we received as a result of this in the past?
That I'm not quite sure. I know we major projects. I know the last big major project that we did that we got a lot of funding for was the Weber River and the kayak park, getting all that taken care of, cleaning up the Ogden River, widening and putting in those what do you call the tree? Yeah, but where the tributary, the bigger areas where water can actually collect instead of flooding over the banks where you put all the rocks in. Can't remember the term for that. Just along the, yeah. Yeah, so
Like
so
a
the
detention pond?
no, it's along the
God.
river,
Oh.
but if
Jeez.
everybody just remembers, back when you were kids, Ogden River was just a pretty narrow river, and anytime you got a lot of water in it, it would go over the banks. Well, now it's quite a bit wider. We have these areas where it will actually collect the water, make it wider instead of flooding over the banks and flooding into our city and things. A big one is right there behind the Walmart, and the new apartments and stuff throughout there. But that's the biggest, that's the last project I think we got a lot of big funding for from the federal government. I don't know if there's any more recent ones.
We did that. One of the other ones was when we had the flooding along the Weaver River.
Yeah.
Funding for that as well.
But that was under the disaster.
That was the
That was under-
disaster.
It wasn't a funding to help prevent disasters, kind of like what this is addressing. That was, we've received some monies. The last check from 2023 flooding was about $150,000 we received from federal, just to help recoup some of our costs that we spent forward to help mitigate some of the flooding issues and things like that. So.
All right. Probably need to move on. There's other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's bring Jeremy. I saw you come in. Let's bring Jeremy up and then.
That on? Okay, yeah, I just have a short presentation as you're going to be looking at this in the next meeting, just to give you a little background on what's happening with the Taylor Canyon Elementary School site. See how I'm driving this. So to give you a little background on this, if you're aware, this was a school site owned by Ogden School District, located approximately 2100 Taylor Avenue, was demolished in 2022, has been functioning as a neighborhood park since the demolition. The school district has owned it and they've been maintaining it as that. Ogden School District notified about the city about their intent to surplus the property. Formally, that letter is in the packet of the transmittal. And then the city has until December 2nd, which is today, to formally notify with the intention of purpose to purchase the property. So that's what will be presented to you today. What this means, this is just the first step in the process if the city decides to move forward with this acquisition. It's just an acknowledgement through the resolution that the city has an intention or is interested in actually purchasing the property. It is not the real estate purchase contract that locks into the terms of the deal of like how much it costs, how much is being purchased for, earnest money, timing, all of that. That's all negotiated after. So what have we done today? That's where I want, is just that first step, which basically notifies the school district that there is an intention to move forward, but all those other things are negotiated after. So this is the site. If you're not familiar with it, this is the before and after the demolition. It's just over 4 acres, some moderate topography from east to west, and it is zoned, the surrounding neighborhoods R16, and that's what it's currently zoned as. So this could be used then as for residential neighborhood or park space, can continue as that, and that's it. That's the current zoning. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the process. As far as the eventual use of that, I don't have much information. I know there's talk that this would be an excellent spot for a park, and that's one of the things I know the administration is considering. So any questions for me?
Jeremy, I had a question. Last time we had one of these come before us, there was already an appraisal done. And do you know, as far as that process goes, do you know why we don't have an appraisal on this one yet?
No, it's a great question. And I think we were just ahead of the game on the last one. It doesn't have to happen before this letter's delivered. So that's just part of the process. But yeah, the previous one, that was all done. So that was, I can see why, that would be of interest. That's really what determines the sales price.
And I think maybe it's more of a question for the school district, right? Because they had, I know we do our appraisal, but they had an appraisal done.
Yeah. And that's the way it works. So the city will obtain their own appraisal. So we'll contract an appraiser to get that done. If we decide to move forward with this intent, and the school district will also, and then we take an average of those two appraisals.
Right.
And negotiate that purchase price from those. So once that number is established, then it's determined if it's really wanting to move forward at that point.
Just have a follow-up question to that. So would it be appraised based on the R16 zoning?
It would. Typically, the appraisal is always done off the highest and best use, not the eventual use. So it would be, regardless of what it eventually becomes, it's appraised based on the highest and best.
And then I just have, it said in the packet, the school district has an appraiser and then we would get our own appraiser, right?
Correct.
We can't use the same one, correct?
No, they have to be
They
separate.
have to be separate.
Yeah.
Because we know who the school district generally uses. And so we get someone
Yeah.
else besides that.
Exactly. Yeah, they have to be separate firms, independent. They can't talk to each other. So we get 2 independent appraisals, and they're generally, in my experience, they've been fairly close. So they do a good job. These are full-blown commercial appraisals when they do this type of development. They're very in-depth and very thorough.
What's the cost of an appraisal?
Depending on what's being appraised. So if it's vacant land like this, it'd be less than if they had a big commercial building on it, where you're looking at comparables on that. So I think the last time we had that, we were paying around 2,000, 2,000 to 3,000, something like that.
How long has that land been vacant?
Since 2022.
I'm just curious, like in other kinds of situations, I'm thinking of like when we're doing a bond, we can set some parameters around it. I'm just wondering, like, if any of that has been considered, because I guess I'm just concerned, just, as we were kind of saying, like, we may not be here to resolve this issue later. So I'm just curious if there's a way to put any parameters around it, because if we just have the money available, it'll just get purchased without coming back to council at all. Versus, if we needed to go back for additional funds, then it would come back for a budget decision. So I just didn't know if that was a consideration or anything like that, or if we've done anything like that before on a property purchase.
Right. Yeah, and this one is different, I think, from the last time we did a school district property. We already knew what that purchase price would be, and we had a source identified for the purchase. This one, I don't know that all those details are answered at this point, so I think that would be, I think Janine might be able to address that better, if that's something that would come back to council or not.
So can I ask this real fast and then maybe you can address both of them? So, I agree with Councilmember Chaburka. I kind of feel the same way, but has a funding source been identified yet? Is there a department? Because if there's a certain department, then that money's available, then they can go ahead and purchase it. It wouldn't come back to us.
Right.
If there isn't, then they would need our approval. And I'm just curious if that's been identified yet. Do we know that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We haven't been told that. But I was gonna say, but I think the budget pretty well. I don't think there's $4 million laying around in extra in anybody's budget, but.
But I
4
do
million
think
steel.
last time we did set aside 2 million for future purchase. That was done 2 years ago.
They have used some of that money.
And that's what I was curious about is has that money been used or what's in that balance, I guess? Yeah.
Is that specifically what being spent, wasn't it? Or was
Yeah, that was kind of the
surplus property.
I don't know if it was surplus property, open space or what it was,
Yeah.
but it seems like I gotta go back in my Wayback Machine.
You're not the new guy anymore. Can't remember.
I was when we did that though.
Can't remember.
Jeremy, I have another question if I could, please. In the discussions of the use of this land, has the discussion come up at all of the other two parks that are nearby?
4 parks.
Well,
There's 4
And a big mountain.
within 0.7.
The 22nd Street Trailhead is 0.5 of a mile.
yeah, and Lions Park is right there and Romer Park, or, within just a couple blocks.
Thomas,
Safety
JC, Lions and D are all within 0.7.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I haven't been a part of, in-depth part of that. I know the administration is aware of the proximity, the other parks. I think that is weighed into the consideration. And I'm probably not the best one to answer that as far as what's the needs of parks are in the city. But I know they are considering that. So I don't know if there's somebody from Parks who wants to address that, but I would be,
I think
wouldn't be probably the best source for that.
Jean's getting ready to move that. I think my challenge is I feel like the Instagram announcement really gave the neighbors an impression of how this property was going to be left open for
Mhm.
people. And I don't mean that was intended, but that's my big concern is that we had talked before about like the best use might be splitting it and using it in a couple different ways or different things. So I feel a little bit worried that people already have an idea of what it's going to be and don't understand that it still has a lot of stages to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I mean, I can only speak for what the process is at this point, and I can't say what the ultimate use would be. I know the intention and the desire is for this to become a park space to some level, but I can't really answer to what that looks like. And it's finished.
And you ask about setting
Oh, yeah.
parameters. Actually, I did work with legal quite a bit on that because of all of the unknowns. I felt like there should be some parameters set. And basically the response from legal is this is a statutory requirement. We have to follow the statutory language. And so that's how they drafted the resolution.
I'm anxious to hear.
Oh, hi, Monty.
Hello. This is song.
There we go.
Yeah, so there was a question on what other parks are right in the area, I think. So, yeah, Lions Park, we have just down almost directly west, just east of Harrison. Thomas Park is, I'm sorry, west, yeah, just east of Harrison is Lions Park. Thomas Park is up the hill from here and a little bit north, within walking distance, I would say. JC Park is on Capitol and Taylor, in between Taylor and Fillmore. Yeah. And then the Memorial obviously is not too far either. It's on 24th Street, just east of Harrison. And then both Big D Park and Mount Ogden Park are not too far either. Although if you were to try to walk or ride your bike to Big D, it would be a little difficult.
Bumpy.
So, yeah, and then number of trailheads, 22nd Street trailhead's quite close. So, bird song.
Well, we've got you here, Mike. Mike is.
There, you can smell.
So when we had residents from that neighborhood in our council meeting 2 months ago, time's blurring by, the mayor spoke to a parks utilization and assessment study. So he could, I think some of what he referenced were, where are our parks? What are their amenities? Are they being used? Are they not being used? Do we need more green space? Do we have plenty of green space? Why isn't the green space we have not being used, and so on and so forth? So that was going to be a part of the data that was considered when we looked at this particular piece of property. Do you know where that assessment, that study is in process at this point in time?
It's nearing its completion. They are preparing that document. It didn't look at all of our parks. It looked at 25 parks. Initially looking at field space, and then we were able to, at those parks, have them also look at the amenities that we have there and what we're lacking, and they were using Placer AI data to look at use patterns and what part of the park people were in, and gathering that data. So it is it's quite close to being complete, but yeah. So
Is it likely that would be available during this next 90-day period if this is passed this evening?
yeah, I think so. I think that'll be a big part of making a educated decision on this. I would
Okay.
think.
So Monty, can I follow up? So I grew up there. I played at Lions Park. I went to Taylor Canyon, Taylor School then. I played at, what's the one up higher?
Thomas.
Park. I was there when they built the Memorial Park and JC Park. But none of those, as far as I know, have any programmable field space. Is that true?
No,
Does-
well, no.
Does Lions,
Thomas has been programmed. JC was not programmed for soccer this fall, but it was in the prior. We've been using JC actually for a few years for some little, some small
yeah, it's slope.
small
That's what I-
games. There's
yeah.
quite a bit of slope there. Lions has been in the past, but just with some of the band of clay through the center, it gets really muddy. And so we've kind of shifted things around and moved them to other places. D Memorial cannot be programmed for organized sports. It's
Mhm.
part of the agreement that the family, when they donated the ground to the city, they didn't want to see it programmed with
Yeah.
with those types of sporting activities. So yeah, but yeah, Thomas is still, although there's no restroom facilities at Thomas, there's put in a new irrigation system a few years ago, and they've been using it since then. We are part of the upcoming ramp cycle for this January is going to address a playground at Thomas. That was one that was on our short list. So it's not written yet though.
Yeah.
So
But so would the plan be to just add another playground or a better playground or a better play space at Taylor Canyon? Or would it be to add more programmable
Oh,
field space? Do
we,
you
I mean,
know?
we haven't got that far, like, at all.
Can I ask just about process at this point? I mean, if we pass this intent, and the appraisals come back and they're just not doable, or we can't come up with some kind of an arrangement, for me, it doesn't make sense to just add another piece of open space without consolidating some of the spaces that's around there that's less used, I guess I should, maybe that's a good way to put it. If we can't work out something that actually works for the city at the end of another 90 days, do we just say, oh, well, I guess we're not gonna actually buy it? How does that work?
Yeah, really, that's exactly it. I mean, the way that Janine said it, this is to follow the legislature. We've just run out of time on this. So you're at December 2nd. We need to respond to them formally. I mean, they've been verbally saying like, we'll work with you and make sure we negotiate this through as far as purchase price and all that goes. There's nothing in this resolution that locks the city into purchasing and moving forward, no matter what the price and all those things. So yeah, all those things have to be identified, source, the use, and the plan is all part of the next step. This is just basically saying, yes, we could be interested in this.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure that we did get some future say. That was kind of your point that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think, in my understanding too, is that obviously the school district doesn't need it for school use. That's why they're willing to sell it. But I thought in the conversations we had with them when we had the 3 properties, right, that they were looking for more single family homes or
Right.
those kinds of dwellings because that brings more students to the community. And I appreciated the conversation about like saying, well, maybe if we leave this part open green space or part of this open green space, that then maybe we can use some of those other properties to help develop those single family homes. But then I can imagine in the future state that the neighbors around those parks will be a little bit frustrated that they've had a park for X amount of years and now we're gonna want to build housing there too. So I think that it's kind of a challenging situation. It's certainly not my district, so good luck to you all. But, and we won't be here, yeah, to resolve it, but I think that's concerning because that's one of the reasons the school district wants to sell the properties, right?
Right. Can I add on to that question? With the required uses, according to the statute, it gives a list of uses
Yeah.
and open space and moderate housing would be the 2 that seem to make the most sense potentially in that space. But if the city were to purchase this and say, we're going to turn this entirely into a park, but we're going to maybe use another park and develop housing there, are we restricted on the same uses based on that? Does that extend to the city using other property that's that, you know, we're essentially we're going to trade. We're going to say we're going to put this green space here, but then we're going to maybe cannibalize this other park and turn it into homes.
I don't think so. I think that would end at the boundaries
Okay.
of the property you're buying.
I thought so, but
it would be,
yeah.
yeah, it'd be a really tough stretch to try and push that regulation onto another property.
Existing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Is this flattenable enough to get a soccer field for instance? Yeah, that's not
I
a
can,
good word,
yeah,
but
I mean,
Because I used to live right above there too. I think below the slope and on maybe that flat part only, and then the rest, no. Right.
Yeah,
No, it is not.
They just set their first sleigh ride.
Yeah.
well, that's what I was just gonna say. It's a
Exactly.
great sleigh riding hill.
There's a couple spots where you could have a soccer
so,
field.
so everything is flattenable. It's just amount of money. If you ask an engineer, that's what they'll tell you. They can do anything if you want to pay for it. But it does have, Monty can stop, he was looking at the elevation.
Yeah, it's a roughly 60-foot drop from the far east to the west. So from what is that, Taylor at the
Bottom.
west? Yeah, Taylor at the west, from Taylor Avenue to where when you look at the photo where the school is still there, that it's a 25-foot drop just from the school location to Taylor.
Great place for bleachers then, huh? Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, there you go.
Well, and I just want to say, I totally appreciate the neighbors and talking about how it's been a really great community, gathering place and all of that. So I'm not trying to discount that use at all, because I used to live right around there too. I'm just thinking more about also the fact that I had a gigantic yard when I lived up there too. I mean, I had to get rid of grass. I mean, it was just, so that's a challenge when you're talking about there's not enough green space when there's houses with gigantic green spaces all around them too. And then the conversation we had with the neighborhood down by Grandview, so that's, you just have to kind of think that.
Any other questions? So we'll pull it off as a consent item so that we can make comments if we want, or not make comments, or
So will you want Jeremy to make another presentation in the meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it's the same one, so I don't want to manage your expectation. I don't have time to do no PowerPoints.
Well, to know publicly what
I'm just kidding.
this is.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
what
understand.
this is, Yeah.
Just want to.
You've got over an hour. You could spruce it up.
all right.
See what I can do.
I would agree with you on that one. I actually think that that's what people are expecting. And I think that not managing our expectations, but I think it's going to be managing
Absolutely.
the neighborhood's expectations. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Next on our agenda is two proposed rezones, one at 1172 Porter Avenue and one at 211 Patterson Street.
Good evening, city councilors. This is a request for a zone change for a piece of property at between Porter and Jefferson, just on the north side of 12th Street. So they're asking for a zone change from an R16 zone to an R2 zone, and including that in the 12th Street corridor overlay, and also a conditional overlay on the piece of property. So the two properties that they're asking for rezone are those that are highlighted in red there. And then the applicant also owns the properties down to 12th Street. And so the proposal would be to include those in the conditional overlay. So this is a closer up picture that you can see. The property owner, Mr. Ponce de Leon, has owned this for some time, and so he's owned these properties, which are currently R2 and in the 12th Street overlay, and he's acquired these two properties just to the north of him. And so he's been trying to figure out what's the best use of these, and so what he'd like to do is consolidate all these into one property and do one project. But because they're split zone, this requires the zone change. This is just a concept plan of what he might do with it. Some sort of townhome project that would lay out with homes fronting 12th Street and then interior access to the property. You can see by consolidating all these into one property gives a lot more flexibility and better economy of scale on how to develop the property. So, and the conditional overlay that's proposed would require that these be owner occupied for a continuous period of no less than 10 years. And this is in the Hillcrest Bonneville Community Plan, and one of the policies of that plan, it says when and where possible, consolidate the small lots along major corridors. As large tracts are created, consider the development of quality multifamily units as the area's population needs and densities increase. So this is basically doing what the community plan envisioned. There are several factors that we look at when doing a zone change. I won't go over all those, but some of those is to provide a definite edge to development between, and buffers between types and uses. So this would be basically separated by Porter Avenue and Jefferson Avenue on the sides, on 12th Street on the south. And on this particular layout, I think they've done a really good job of providing their open space on the north side so that there'd be a good buffer between that and the existing single-family neighborhoods. Zoning is to reflect the prevailing character of the overall area. And 12th Street is developing, there are several small offices along there. There are several multifamily developments of kind of the same scale as this. There are a lot of single-family homes, especially as you get into the to the north into the neighborhoods, but this would be in character with the general character of the area. You're supposed to draw edges between the uses, and again, this would let's see, transitioning from commercial to apartments to single-family development. So this would provide some transition from the heavier traffic uses on 12th Street and onto the single-family neighborhoods. So the Planning Commission's looked at this. They're recommending approval, and it's, again, 3 actions. It's rezoning the 2 parcels on the north from R16 to R2, and then it's extending the conditional overlay to all the properties, and then it's the development agreement, which would limit those to owner-occupied units. That's the staff report.
Chair, I've got a question. Can you back up one slide? We're all familiar with the Google driving map, and it's when you know that the traffic's stopped, it's red. Look at C2 and Adams. That's currently what it is, like almost all the time, just red traffic. So I'm curious, was there a traffic study done to indicate, are we going to add possibly 34 new vehicles to that area, and how that's going to impact 12th Street? I've been in there where we've been backed up pretty darn close to that, what is that, Porter or not Jefferson or whatever, yeah, or Porter, yeah, where you're sitting there, and it's pretty rough. So I'm just curious, and that may not really apply. I mean, that may be a bigger discussion about traffic flow through the city of Ogden and specifically that area, but oftentimes you'll have even big trucks pulling, one of their loads onto Adams or trying to come out of there, and it's a big mess. So that was the first question. The second question has to do with the 12th Street overlay, and did we just go one property deep on that overlay? Is that why it didn't extend further, or when that was originally done, the overlay?
Okay. So the first question, the traffic study, no, there hasn't been a traffic study done on this. There, it is along state highway. There, you do have to, get approval from the state in order to develop next to it. So that'll be taken into account, and it will add traffic to the corridor, and that is, a busy corridor.
I'm sorry, did you say they will have to do a study then?
Yes.
In order to develop it?
Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of things are they going to discover out of the study like that? Is that?
Yeah, most of the time you're looking at safety of,
Okay.
and you can look at level of service to make sure that intersections don't drop below, a specific level of service.
Okay. I love the idea of more housing stock. I love the idea of owner occupancy and all of that. My biggest concern, honestly, first thought when I saw this was, man, traffic is so tough there. So anyway, that was.
Yeah. And your second question, yeah, we specifically went one lot deep on 12th Street. And that's why they have to do a zone change to
incorporate that next one.
Incorporate those.
Yeah,
properties.
that makes sense to me. Okay.
I have a comment. I just want to commend Jaime Ponce de Leon for his idea. I really like it a lot, and I like the fact that he's worked with planning to develop that, and I just want to express my support for this project.
Just to follow up, I actually, believe it or not, knocked a few doors and had a few phone calls in that area as I was campaigning, and that was the #1 issue, was trying to just get onto 12th Street. So I don't know, why would you need, would UDOT make you do, I mean, because it's coming out on Porter, I would think that UDOT would not make you do that, but
Yeah, they typically require, well, if they're doing an access directly to it, they would.
it's access to,
But,
onto
but
Porter.
city can also require
Okay.
one.
I would make
and
sure that that
typically, if
wouldn't
it's
then-
adjacent to that, we would require one.
UDOT wouldn't necessarily be the, we would have to, I think. I could be wrong.
From the map view, it looks like there's a couple of curb cuts that are on 12th right now that are gonna go away with this. They might be obsolete, but they're still there, right?
Yes, yeah, they are. There's.
So
two right there.
they'll both dump onto Porter or Jefferson.
Mhm.
Well, both ends of that. And it does go over to 10th Street if somebody wants to avoid the 12th Street area and get out going that way. So, that, I don't, when you look at a development like this, if you look at the percentage of traffic this is gonna add, it's gonna be 0.0 something. It's not gonna add a lot to the traffic, but where traffic is already bad, certainly that's a concern, but people are pretty ingenious and they'll figure out a way around. And that's kind of what I would see would happen here is if they're gonna go west, maybe they're gonna go to 12th Street. If they're gonna go east, they're gonna go over to 10th. So, because they can't get across 12th. That's what I would expect to happen. I like the concept. I like the plan. I like, it meets the community plan, goals.
And the traffic impact is minuscule compared to the other development further up 12th Street.
Yeah. Public comment at the planning commission meeting. What was that all about? Was there any or?
It said that there were two comments. It didn't list who they were, but that they talked about traffic was one of the concerns. I can't remember what the other was. But I also noticed in the packet, there wasn't, normally we see the noticing and who had been noticed.
Oh, okay.
That was missing in the packet.
Okay,
So
sorry.
I don't know. I asked some neighbors what they thought about the development and they said we hadn't heard about it. So I thought they may have lived within, maybe they lived just outside the boundary of notice, but then I also couldn't see who had been noticed.
Yeah, sorry, we typically
Yeah,
include that.
and it's on the next presentation had
Yeah.
it, so.
All right, any other questions for Barton? All right. Is there a time that's going to be on an agenda? Okay. All right, so maybe we can get that information to Councilmember Rich.
Yes.
That'd be great. All right, 211 Patterson Street.
Okay. This is also a request for a zone change from the property owner, who happens to be the Housing Management and Development Corporation, which is run by the Ogden Housing Authority. They're requesting a zone change of property at 211 Patterson from an R4 multifamily zone to an R5 multifamily zone. So this is the map of the property. So the Ogden Housing Authority recently developed an apartment building on this property just to the south. And they also own the property on the corner of Patterson and Lincoln here. And they're requesting a zone change. All this is zoned R4 and they were requesting it to change to R5. This is just a plat of it. And this you can see is the vacant property, and this is an older aerial. This is actually developed with an apartment at this point by the Housing Authority. And kind of the story on this, the Housing Authority purchased this property. They applied for a site plan review to do a 12-unit apartment building there. They're intending to house young adults who have aged out of foster care. So you hit 18, you're no longer a youth, but you're really no longer an adult. And so there's that transition period where people are looking for housing. So the Housing Authority proposed a project to to develop 12 housing units, which would comply with the R4 zoning on that property. That project was approved and they went to get funding, and part of the funding application was that there wasn't enough value for the based on the cost for the funding authorities to just get the 12 units. They wanted to see more units if they were going to fund it. And so the housing authority had to sort of retool their application and look at doing a larger project. And so they came up with this, which would be a 4-story building, which would match the development that they did just to the south. Small units there. This is what it would look like basically. But going from 12 to 25 requires a zone change. The R5 zoning would allow that, the R4 wasn't, and so that's why they're coming to you with the request for the rezone. And looking at some of the Jefferson Community Plan provisions, one is to integrate new multi and single family development in the surrounding areas through context sensitive design. And then there's the factors for consideration there. Zoning should reflect the prevailing character of the overall district. And here, 31st Street's a commercial zone. It's got more commercial uses. And then here you can see the existing apartment building that they've constructed. So this would tie in and be the same style and same owner management of those. As far as drawing edges on the type of uses transitioning from commercial to apartments to single family. Again, this is a commercial zone, though it has multifamily here, and that would be a transition. The edge. So, and the Planning Commission's also heard this one, and they're recommending approval of the rezone on this.
I definitely have a couple questions. And this age group is desperately in need of housing, so I totally agree, but I'm a little confused as to why we would allow these 2 apartment complexes that are for lower income people to be on the same block when we're so worried about concentrating poverty.
Yeah, that's a choice that the council needs to make. I'd say in this case, this is a specific demographic they're looking at. They would be managed by the Ogden Housing Authority. That's a big part of the success of one of those, is being able to have good management. And so having both projects would assist with the management of that, but that's certainly a choice to make.
A question that kind of goes along with that, and maybe you don't even know the answer, but you know, they've aged out of the foster care program. That's why they're here. Do they age out of this program?
So if it's 18 to 24, yeah, I think there is. I mean, usually there is like a particular band.
I see some heads nodding in the back, so yes.
Okay, I just wonder,
But the packet does say no limit on how long residents may remain in development. And that to me was a question as to why have it? Well, so yeah, the packet does specifically say that there's no limit on how long residents may remain in the development. And so it's targeted for young adults as they age out of foster care. But if there's not a target, if there's not an age out, then maybe I read it wrong, or why have a specific age group if they can just stay in there? I mean, at some point in time, wouldn't that become a problem if somebody doesn't age out, I guess?
I don't know the answer to that. I can ask the applicant.
Yeah,
We can
and
provide-
somewhat related is a statement that they offer supportive services that help residents build basic life skills. So that tells me they're kind of working toward
Yeah.
transitioning them out. But and my question around that is that the goal? And 2, will those services be offered in that building? Or do they attend classes in another location, or what's that look like as well?
I do know there's an expectation to provide services for those
In the building?
individuals
So
in the
life build
building, from life
Okay,
skills, yeah.
thank you.
That's it.
we allowed to address this? I'm with the Housing Authority. I can kind of answer some questions.
Let's finish some questions and then maybe we'll have some answer to that. I do have a question too. I mean, I think, are we really concentrating poverty though? I mean, I think, if you're trying to compare it to other parcels that we've talked about that, do we have halfway houses there? Do we have other, do we know, we did a heat map around,
There's a school of addiction recovery down the block.
yeah, I don't know
There's
those
the
answers.
That's an important question.
Yeah.
There.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there are a few facilities there. You've got a cross wall, there's facilities also there.
Great.
Um,
Might need to be answered. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to see that heat map.
I
I did have a constituent ask about traffic, and I know, again, we do traffic studies, et cetera, but with that many units right there, it is a residential block, with single family homes. What gets done about the traffic?
Yeah, so the sort of local residential streets, I mean, they carry very light residential traffic. I mean, it's always a difference when, you have one car going every minute and suddenly you have 1.2 cars going every minute, but it's really pretty light traffic onto the north. There would be additional traffic on 31st Street,
They
which
like
is,
that. The residents probably like light traffic.
yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not anything that
Patterson. Mhm.
those streets would be fully able to handle all that traffic. It's just,
And what's the difference between an R4 and an R5? I mean, how many more people are we talking?
yeah, it basically goes from the 12 units max to 25 units max. So, it doubles the amount that you could do, but you're going from 12 to 25. That's what it would do.
With a residential facility like that, is it the parking, is it the same as other kinds of residences? Or?
You can do reduced if it's low income, which this would be close to transit. There, haven't assessed that, whether you get a deduction for close to transit, but you could do low income, which would be 0.8 per unit, I believe is the number.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Point of interest, can't turn my mic on. A number of us left our mics on, and I think that limits us to be able to use our mics. So there's a couple that have just been left on, and then if you try to come on to add or ask a question, you can't do it. So just express that concern. And I would like to hear from the petitioner.
Yeah, one at the end's on.
All right, couple questions. Petitioner? Who, I couldn't hear who.
Do we have specific
Somebody from the
questions for
Ogden
them?
Housing Authority? That's great. Thanks.
So do you know why this location was chosen when it's right next to other low-income apartments?
Pardon me, ma'am.
Do you know why this location? I mean, I know that the housing authority already owns the land, but is it appropriate to have it right next to another low-income housing or the permanent supportive housing?
Actually, yes. In the way that they can share services. These are actually different populations, but as far as maintenance of the building, counselors, the type of programs that come in from the community, it actually works very well to have the two facilities together.
And I apologize, I kind of asked you the question before you even introduced yourself, so I apologize.
Thanks.
There were a couple of questions about the functioning of the program. We're filling in for Tim Price, the executive director that's out of town, but Marquita Wheeler is here from the Housing Authority. I think she could answer some of your questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
No.
I don't think it said his name.
Good evening. I'm Marquita. I'm actually the property manager for Solace, that is right there by it. Low income, I understand the concern, but this will be a Section 42 LIHTC project. So the goal is to bring these homeless youth or youth aging out of foster in, give them their life skills and advance them out. Once they've been there a year, they can request a voucher and go out into the community. So then we can pick up the next child or young adult that needs the assistance. We will have case management there. We will get our tenants from Youth Future. They're very pro this project. It's a need in the city. From the last count I had, there was 38 homeless youth. And I know 25 doesn't fix the problem, but it puts a big dent in it. And we'll be working with DCFS to get the youth aging out of foster and the coordinated entry. But it is a permanent supportive housing project, kind of like Solace, but more towards helping these youth that have had a hard life get back together, back on their feet, and have a better life. So that is our goal with this project. It will be based off 30% of their income. It's fully subsidized with project-based vouchers through the housing authority. When they get a job, then they will start paying 30% of their income. And Solace has 56 units, and we've been there a year now. December 9th will be 1 solid year. And we, out of the 56, we have 10 that have gotten off the street, got a job, and is paying the full rent there. So it's very, very successful with our case management and the due diligence of the property management team that I have to mitigate issues that come up and help them navigate life. We know that putting a roof over their head is the first step, but it takes a whole year for them to feel safe and secure. And I'm very proud of what we've done at Solace. And I think this youth project is very dear to my heart. I've been wanting this for 10 years now. I do the public housing side. So I do the families that come in, and I see the issues with children and how sometimes they're just discarded and nobody to help them. So I think this project, we can help children that are in need instead of just looking the other way.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, and I didn't get the gentleman's name before.
Harold Woodruff, he's our architect.
Oh, great, thank
So
you.
he designed Solace and we'll be designing it. So it's going to be just a mini Solace. So it will definitely beautify that area.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Barton?
Barton, there's going to be parking around this building?
Yes.
What are the requirements on that? Is there a specific number of stalls per unit or?
If it's low income, 0.8 stalls per dwelling unit.
Per unit, okay.
There's a very big parking lot around the apartment that's there now, and it's never full. So maybe we need to look at parking requirements. Or maybe they can use overflow parking there.
I wouldn't think a lot of those residents have vehicles, but we're working towards getting them, it sounds like, but maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, what's really challenging about that block, if you look, I mean, there are some driveways, it's just, there are a lot of people do park on the street, and I'm just thinking about our winter snow ordinance too.
Yeah.
So I think, if it's empty, that's great, but then it could be a challenge if there's that many units and there's not enough, places to park too. I think that heat map would be helpful. I am totally in support of providing this type of housing for this population in our community, but I get a little frustrated when we can't have it in certain areas of the community, but other areas are okay to have this much concentration. And so that is a really big challenge. Why that would be okay in my mind for this council that voted against the Aspen House to put it in this neighborhood, that would just be kind of shocking to me that everybody would be super supportive of putting it right here when you have low-income senior housing down the block. I mean, yeah, I think the heat map will reveal a lot.
But they could already do it now if they wanted to only build 12, right?
12, yeah, which is a different.
And
amount.
apparently based on our zone Ogden last week, but they can put 15 people in those houses.
Each one.
So you should be
Yeah.
fine. Sorry, that was a side note. Yeah, no, I think that that's great. All right, any other questions? Heat map to come. Thank you. All right, next on, we have it on the agenda for next week, but we might have to look at that again.
Yeah, it's on there. It's been noticed,
Yeah.
so it'll have to be on the agenda.
Okay.
On the agenda because it's been noticed, but then what you do with it after you've heard it is up to you.
Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is the airport leasing policies. Jared? Brian?
Jared.
Somebody needs to lead it, or we can move on. Good.
Get
Today.
something to eat.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So we've put this presentation together, and I believe Ryan is going to kick it off and answer questions, and I'm here for any backup or follow-up. Or alternatively, we could just approve it and have a half hour before our next meeting. I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Brian. Is everybody able to see the presentation? Hear me okay? Great. I apologize I couldn't be there. I actually had a city council working session meeting in Heber on the exact same topic. We're doing a leasing policy there as well. And so this is very timely, but the two working sessions overlapped, and so it didn't give me time to travel down there. But I'm excited to meet with you again to discuss leasing policy this time. Where we finished up minimum standards last time, I mentioned it is usually one of the easier topics to discuss because it really only impacts commercial operators. Leasing policy is probably the most anticipated policy for tenants of the airport because it impacts everybody. And this is where a lot of the issues historically have been and hopefully will be resolved through this policy. I've got just a handful of slides I want to run through, and then we'll use the rest of the time for questions and discussion. Starting off here, just wanted to kind of go over the grant assurances. I know I've covered this a number of times now on council as the airport sponsor's responsibility for the airport, but I'm not going to go through all of these, just hit on a couple I think that are really relevant when we cover leasing policy. The two big ones here, I'd say, are number 5 and number 24. So 5 being preserving rights and powers. Again, the sponsor of the airport can't do anything that would deprive it of its right to properly manage the airport. Where this comes into leasing is where you agree to terms of leases that would prohibit you from complying with other grant assurances, or effectively lease the land so long that you really are transferring the asset in effect. And so the FAA considers any lease more than 50 years, essentially the equivalent of a transfer because the term is so long. Number 24, I mentioned about making decisions with the goal of achieving self-sufficiency. And this is where it's really challenging for sponsors because what's in the best interest of the airport is not always in the best interest of the tenants. And it's trying to fight that right balance of balancing politics and responsibility towards being a steward of the airport. And so that's always a challenge. A lot of these things aren't easy. I will say, though, with the stakeholders that we've engaged with through this process, I think both the stakeholders and the airport are looking at each other's best interest. And I think what we have to present in terms of a draft lease policy really does a good job of bringing both sides together and presenting a policy that's fair, equitable, but also in the best interest of the airport in achieving self-sufficiency without, leveraging the assets that the airport has unfairly against the users and the tenants. We've talked a lot about these primary managing compliance documents, the kind of core three in the middle that we've gone through there and are still working towards revising. That's part of the ordinance change proposals that we have tonight. But really just want to focus on the bottom of that diagram with leasing policy and Templar lease. That's the piece we're working on here. It's not part of the core primary management compliance documents, what I'd consider, but they all reference this policy, or I should say this policy will all reference those documents and plays a key piece in each one of those. The airport leasing policy is, again, key in ensuring that the airport is complying with grant assurances. At the same time, it's really a guide for airport and city staff in preparing leases, negotiating leases, and the administration of those leases over the term that they're effective for. Some of the things that are included there are how do you just handle lease requests, whether it's an unsolicited statement of interest, where the airport isn't advertising space that's available, but there's somebody that's requesting to be able to move onto the airport, whether it's for commercial use or private use. And then once that's received, what's the process for publicly noticing it, for how long? And if you receive other statements of interest, then subsequent to the public notice, what's the process of doing a competitive bid through the RFP process in terms of, either a unique RFP or then accepting an application form, determining its completeness, approval, appeal procedures, things that you typically find within planning code, but that's specific to the management of airport property and its development. So probably the biggest issue when it comes to leasing policy is term. And when I say term, what I mean here is the length of the lease itself. The lease term should be based on a determination of the premise useful life and how long it will take to amortize the cost of any capital improvements to structures that are built on that lease. Let me jump back a little bit and just kind of explain this concept further. We talked about preserving rights and powers. The property at the airport is federally subsidized, and therefore the sponsor must maintain control of that. You can't transfer that property away from the airport without the FAA's approval. In most cases, they won't approve of that. Even if you're using it for non-aeronautical use, the FAA still has to say that that's okay. So highly regulated property. What you can do, though, is you can lease that property for aeronautical use, and that falls well within grant assurances. And so when we're looking at terms of the lease, again, we want to make sure that it's preserving the airport's rights and powers to be able to direct and control that property and any improvements that are made to it by the tenants. The FAA compliance manual, it's really kind of a very detailed, several hundred-page document that are instructions for airport managers. States that most tenant ground leases of 30 to 35 years are sufficient in order for that asset essentially to be the investment to be recovered and amortized over the term of a lease. So what the FAA is essentially saying here is it typically takes 30 to 35 years for a tenant to recover their investment that they make on bare ground on what we call a reversionary lease. And I'll get into that in a little more detail. Probably the biggest philosophical challenge when it comes to airport leasing is who owns the property that's being developed on there, and is there a reasonable expectation of, or what is the reasonable expectation of return, right? So with the concept that I just kind of supplied here with that compliance manual, aeronautical storage hangars are not necessarily a long-term investment. They're providing utility during the term of the lease, but essentially that utilitarian value depreciates down to zero at the expiration of the lease. And that's very different than most commercial leases and private leases that people are used to. And so we'll see often that tenants are confused with the leases that they have because they're used to buying an asset, paying a lot of money for it, and being able to flip that asset later for more money. And that does happen at airports, but that's not the intent of airport development. And so how you approach airport leasing really hinges on the philosophy of how an airport asset depreciates or appreciates over time, and who has an interest in that asset. I'm going to get into that more in the next slide. Before I do that, I'll say that in discussions with stakeholders, the standard term that's proposed for a ground lease is a 20-year term with 2 10-year extensions. So it's really 40 years over the term of the lease. That's a little bit higher than what the FA compliance manual suggests, but really this is what we kind of thought was fair in terms of a development. And there are alternatives to get even a longer lease than that if the developer can propose or show financial consideration that justifies a longer term lease to amortize that investment over the term of that lease. Going on to the next slide, I mentioned reversion. This is probably the most
Can I
contentious
ask a
issue.
question on
Yeah,
that?
please do.
Just before. So it seems like that was one of the complaints or one of the concerns I'd heard before was that somebody would have a lease and then they'd sell that lease to somebody else, and the understanding was, okay, this is sort of an investment. Is there language in this to just either not discourage the practice, but at least shed light on what's actually happening there?
Yes, there is. So in the leasing policy, the airport retains its right to approve all leases. So a sale can't happen without the airport getting involved. And that's what we've seen typically be the biggest issue, is where a hangar is sold, the lease is being transferred to the new buyer, and they don't fully understand the terms of the reversionary lease and what that means, and even how much life is left on that lease. Where we've seen issues where you have people that are, investing their life savings in a new hangar, thinking it's an investment that they'll be able to sell again, like they've seen their predecessors do, and double or triple their investment in that. Keeping the airport involved in that process helps them understand that this is the lease that you're getting and that there's a limited life on that lease. And the way that we've set the policy up is that the lease actually isn't even transferred to the new owner. The new owner would be getting a new lease with the existing term being transferred to them. So if there's 13 years left on that lease of the original tenant, when that hangar, the asset or the improvements are transferred to a new buyer, they're going to get the original 13 years, but on a new lease that's directly with the city. So there's no assignment that's going on. The assignment's essentially being happened by creating a new lease. And that's forming that relationship with the airport and the tenant, and the airport will have the chance to be able to communicate that and the process that's outlined in the leasing policy.
I've got a question too, Ryan.
Yeah.
So, some of the things that have happened in the past, we kind of want to learn from our mistakes, is a leasee will spend a bunch of money upgrading the building without, nearing the end of the lease term. And then they want to come and say, well, hey, I just spent a bunch of money. And so does the airport management have the ability to know about that kind of an expenditure, or are these guys just doing it on their own?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is another one of those challenging things. I'll talk about different alternatives for lease extensions. I've got a slide that'll hit on this. What I'll say is the way we approach this is not looking at how much money's invested, but really how well the hangar's been maintained overall. So what is the condition of the asset at the time that a lease is being requested? And we do that through a facility condition index assessment. So it's essentially a third-party assessment of the asset, what the conditions of the different features, I'll say, of the hangar, the roof, the door, any HVAC, and what investment would need to be made into the hangar to bring it up to the index that's required to get an extension. And from that, you're essentially able to put everybody on level par. So whether the investment was made 20 years ago, or there hasn't been investment made, but they've just, kept up and maintained the infrastructure all along the lease, we're only looking at what the condition of the lease is at the end of the term when they're requiring extension. Does that help?
It does. It still seems like there might be some tension, from some. So, but
yeah, I'll hit on this in that slide, and let's bring up some questions and go into it a little bit deeper then, I think, and maybe I can answer that in the meantime. So I mentioned reversion and how this is a really contentious issue. It's a hot topic all over the country. I'd say 95% of airport leases are reversionary because it goes back to that grant assurance number 5, preserving rights and powers. The idea here, again, is that the airport needs to be able to control the asset and even the improvements that are made on the airport itself. So with reversion, upon expiration of the lease agreement, any improvements that are made on the ground essentially revert back or transfer to the leaseor, the airport sponsor in this case, usually at the lessor's option. So if the improvements are not in good shape and you don't want to take them, then you require the tenant to essentially remove those and return the lease premise to its original condition. If they are in good shape, there are also alternatives to extend the lease or provide a new lease that would have what we call an improved land rent, so that you'd be paying a higher rent from land to improve. So not only are you paying the ground lease rate, but you're also paying for the improvements that you have built and added to those, a rental rate on top of that. Now, the reason why reversion exists, because again, it provides that control over development and use of airport property. But the bigger thing here, and this is where Grant Assurance 24, the revenue and self-sustainability ties in, is it provides a robust future revenue stream that supports financially self-sustainable airports. The airports that we see across the country that are in good shape are those that managed this right 30, 40, 50 years ago. And now we're reverting assets where they're collecting really good revenue streams on those. And the idea here is that reversion is an incentive for private development to invest into the airport. So you're giving a lower ground rent to incentivize development on the airport. And essentially the sponsor is collecting their investment at the end of the term. So they're incentivizing development. The developer gets to collect revenue over the term of the lease, recover their asset plus a reasonable return on their investment. And then the airport takes over that asset and collects a revenue stream at the end of that. So it's kind of delayed investment in the airport by incentivizing private development. That really only works, though, if you exercise reversion and if you set it up correctly. The problem here is that taking over somebody else's asset at the end of the term is not very politically popular. And it can be really hard for airport sponsors to do that because it just doesn't seem fair, particularly when it may be second or third person that has bought this asset and transferred it, and they weren't the ones that developed and don't fully understand, reversion. Now, jumping in the next slide here, let me go through the kind of lease economics that I'd say over a reversion versus a non-reversionary lease. And this gets back to that philosophical difference between how you approach the airport development. So I know this graph is probably not the easiest to see, but we're looking here at essentially a typical box hanger with what we'd say a 70-year useful life from construction, right? So year zero, the bare ground, we give somebody a lease to build improvements on there at about $2 a square foot is the assumption here. So $500,000 hanger. And then over the term of that lease, it's going to depreciate. In a reversionary lease, that asset depreciates for the tenant down to zero over the term of the lease. So let's say 40 years in this case. Whereas in a non-reversionary lease, that asset's depreciating, but it still has value at the end of the life because the improvements they have, they still retain. However, that asset only has value if they can get a new lease. And that's really up to the airport whether they want to give that or not. And for the airport, it's a decision of, do we take over in a non-reversionary lease? Do we extend the lease, or do we bring in new development where we're going to get an asset at the end of it? So if the airport doesn't want to give a new lease, the value of that tenant is the depreciated value less whatever it would cost them to remove that improvement and rebuild it somewhere else, which essentially takes that value, near zero. Now, there are a lot of different financial assumptions here. There might be some value left in it in the end, but really for the airport, what we're seeing here is that in a reversionary lease, the airport gets an asset that still has 30 years life left and can generate revenue from renting that asset out. In a non-reversionary lease, it's really messy because you have an asset that has value on land that was improved, but it belongs to the tenant, but they have to essentially remove it to have value there. And by removing that, it really, offsets any value that's left. So I bring this up only because non-reversionary leases, they're not common. I'd say they're problematic in that what happens at the end of the lease if the tenant doesn't agree to an extension and they refuse to remove their improvement. Maybe it's been extended to 70 years, and so you've got an asset that has no value. The airport has to take it over and spend money to do that, or the tenant ends up in perpetual holdover where you can't get them off and you have to go through proceedings to essentially evict them. So those are some of the challenges with non-reversionary leases and why we don't typically see them at airports. I will say AOPA, which is the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, has a position on reversion. AOPA is very strong in their advocacy for pilots and airport tenants. And their view here is that reversion is not the only option, right? That there are kind of win-win scenarios that the airport and tenants can look for in trying to find alternatives to reversion that still bring consideration back to the airport for the new lease, where the tenant still gets to have useful use of the asset that they built and have purchased. And so there's a few different options for that we're going to go into. Just a few things here. Extending or renewing reversionary ground leases without getting any kind of consideration back or collecting incremental revenue really is contrary to making the airport as self-sufficient as possible. In this case, at the end of the term, the airport could take back that asset and rent it out. So there's incremental revenue that's coming there. If you choose to extend that lease without getting anything back, you're essentially foregoing all that rental income that you could have got. But lease extensions may be appropriate for tenants in good standing where improvements exist. And this is where that facility condition index comes into place. You want to reward and incentivize people maintaining their hangars and putting investment into it and being good tenants. If they're in good standing with the airport, we don't want to just kick off good tenants, take their asset over and rent it to somebody else. It makes sense to incentivize investment over the term of the lease and also reward those tenants by allowing them to stay in their hangar. But there has to be some kind of consideration that comes back to the airport and keeping the airport sustainable. And so tenants seeking a new lease, in this case, we suggest they provide the airport with the facility condition assessment that evaluates the structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, as well as any non-compliance with current building codes, and then identify what investment would be required to bring the hangar up to the FCI that would be needed in order to get an extension. So the airport also, and this goes back to the issue that we discussed earlier, the airport also has the right to approve sale of any private hangars, and that's necessary to preserve the airport's rights and powers under Grant Assurance 5. But we also want to make sure that tenants have a good understanding of what we're looking for and what the requirements are to approve any assignment or transfer of a lease and approving a sale. So to balance kind of the responsibility that the sponsor has of generating enough revenue to keep the airport self-sufficient while still providing, an equitable option for airport tenants, there's a few different options. The most common is investment for a term. This is what we mentioned earlier, where, at the end of the lease, tenants will put money in to improve the hangar so that when it does eventually revert, that the airport is getting an asset that has more value in it and will have a longer life later. So you're getting more useful life for extension on the term. The alternative to that is you could do a deferral fee, which is essentially looking at what the rental income that you would generate over the term of the extension and doing a net present value of that the tenant would pay up front. So they're essentially buying the rent up front of that asset. Or you could do what we call an improved hangar rent, where you're essentially just amortizing that deferral fee out over the term of the extension so that it's not a lump sum up front, but it's just built into the ground rent that they're paying, but later on top with an improved hangar rent. And then, of course, reversion is a last resort when you do have, bad faith actors, or there's redevelopment that's necessary, or, avoiding holdover. So these are all models that allow abrupt reversion while still getting value back to the airport, but maintaining goodwill with the tenants on the airport. So that's really what we're trying to build into this leasing policy. These next steps, and I'll let staff kind of comment on this as well. The timeline was pretty aggressive here. I believe you received a draft of the leasing policy that we've developed. The idea here was to come back in a week or two and pass the Title 8 amendments that would be replaced by this leasing policy. So with that, I know not a ton of time left, but I'd love to take some questions and open up discussion.
Any questions?
I have one. So in reading the packet, the lease increases at a 3% rate, not at the CPI.
Yes.
And if I'm understanding your presentation, part of the reason for that, at least early on in the lease, is to aid the owner of the hangar in amortizing that cost of the hangar more quickly.
Yeah, really the fixed annual increase it roughly keeps up the CPI. Part of the problem is that the consumer price index is really not a good proxy for replacement cost of a hangar. The other thing is we do periodic market adjustments. So in this case, every time an extension happens, you're gonna bump up the rate that they're paying to whatever the currently approved rate in the city's consolidated fee schedule is. So the annual adjustment is really just trying to keep pace. So then we do hit a market rate adjustment, it comes right back up.
Yeah, but if the lease is 20 years and you don't revisit this for 20 years,
Yep.
and you have a period of some aggressive inflation for 3 years, you're still way behind. I'm having a hard time understanding why you wouldn't want to keep up with the actual cost of living increases to avoid that big jump at the term of 20 years or 30 years or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we modeled this
Let me
out.
jump in here real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I ran a 20-year analysis for the last CPI adjustments for the Western region, and it came out to 2.8% on an average for the last 20 years. For an airport our size, looking at that, determining whether it's adjusted seasonally, not, all the markets the airport spends more money in fuel, insurance, and maintenance than the CPI accounts for. So my recommendation was 3.25%. The tenants didn't like that. They wanted 2.8. So we settled in the middle. They wanted the average. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they? So we settled in the middle because the airport does expend more than the average household at 3%. It just makes it a lot easier. The tenant can know what their rent increase will be. They can predict that rather than 4% or 1.5% each year. And finance liked it too, so we didn't have to adjust that either. Go ahead.
Well,
Kurt?
those of us in the real world, they'll live with advancing prices every single day. And if you ran that same scenario during Jimmy Carter's administration, you might get different numbers.
Yeah, and I guess the point is the annual the 3% annual increase is really just to try and keep pace with the replacement cost of the hangar, because that's really what it is. What we found is that CPI has maybe stayed half of what the actual replacement cost of the hangar is anyway. So what happens is if you do market rate adjustment, it's going to go up. And you're right, in some cases it could be big. We don't want to build in we could do CPI, but CPI is not going to keep pace either. There's a better index that you could use, but it's not something people are familiar with. So the idea here is just try and keep the rents in line with what the market rate is going to be, so that when the adjustment comes up, it's not a large jump. And there's multiple ways to do that. The 3% fixed is the simplest way, and tends to avoid that large jump in market rates.
It's a suggestion. We can, right now it's CPI, attached to the CPI, and we can leave it that way.
The challenge with CPI is there's no predictability. With a fixed rate, the tenants know what they're going to pay for the next 20 years. Beyond that is where that market rate adjustment comes in. So it makes it easier for the airport to administer, and it makes it easier for the tenants to kind of budget and predict what their rent's going to be.
Chair, I guess Kurt is part of the team.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that okay?
Kurt, do you have a comment?
Hi, can you hear me, Ryan?
Yes.
The earlier question was, I think, about the improvements being made by tenants, let's say during their existing term, when then they come back to the airport asking for, an extension from the improvements they made. And I think the question was, how does the airport track that? And most agreements, ground lease agreements, would have a provision in it that would provide for any improvements to be made on the land, in those improvements that the airport owns the land on, that they would go to the airport for consent for those improvements. Even though the asset, the building, is owned by the tenant, they would still go to the airport for approval. And that's one means of evaluating how those improvements are completed. Before such a presentation is made to say, well, I made all these improvements, now I deserve an extension. Those should be being managed during the course of the term.
And I'll add to what Kurt said too, that, the investment for term option is probably the most common option for getting extensions on leases. It can be problematic though, because as Kurt mentioned, in this policy, we have some development guidelines. Brian's also working on a policy that will cover development guidelines that requires the tenants to come to the airport for approval anytime they're going to make improvements. And at that point, you'd have a discussion on how much term could you be getting an extension for with the improvements that you're making. The problem is that's really subjective, and you can run into unfair, I'll call it favoritism. But if you're not treating everybody the same, then you can run into claims where people feel like they're being discriminated against because they didn't get a fair extension of term for the investment they made relative to somebody else that's similarly situated. So it can be really challenging, I think, to use the investment for term, even if you put it into a matrix where you're giving ranges of investment. Somebody at the bottom is still getting the same term extension as somebody at the top of that range, and it's not a great way to do it. Plus, we want to incentivize people that are taking good care of their hangars and maintaining it, and that's why we tend to like the facility condition index approach.
Okay, can I just run through the scenario then? So I'm building a new hangar. I get my initial 20-year lease. It's going along, and at the end of my 20-year lease, I can come in for another extension. Or if I sell my lease, I'm not really selling it to another individual. I'm not crossing it across. Does it mean I cannot sublet my lease either? So I'm maintaining, I'm keeping the lease, but I'm letting somebody else rent my hangar for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that doesn't keep me from doing that though, does it?
No, we do address subleasing in here, but it's allowed for private hangars as long as there's not a commercial use that's trying to be in there. That is an issue that we have at the airport today, where they're commercial operation. There are private individuals that are subletting to commercial operators.
Okay, so to continue with my scenario, so the airport has a desire to install an RDA. They want to do some redevelopment in the area, and so they outline an area that they're going to determine as an RDA, and that's just before my 20 years is up. I come in, I want to get my 10-year, but they're going to say, nope, you only get 5 now, and you're not going to get an extension. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that way I understand this?
It's similar to that. So what I would say is I'll run through the scenario for you, right? So you start with bare ground, you give it a lease. The standard lease term that we proposed here is a 20 plus 2 tenths. So it's essentially a 40-year term. For the first 20 years, you're going to be at whatever the rate is established in the fee schedule, plus a 3% annual adjustment for the first 20 years. After that term, you get essentially an automatic extension as long as you are in good standing with the airport. And it's going to adjust the rate to whatever the currently approved rate is in the fee schedule. You get 2 of those essentially that take you up to 40 years. After the end of 40 years, as long as you're in good standing, your lease would expire at that point. And that's when we look at the options for the tenant that can request within 180 days of the expiration of the lease for a new lease, right? In that case, you get a 10 plus another 10. So you could get another 20 years on the end of that if you're willing to put in the investment to bring it up to the minimum index that's required. And therefore, the airport's getting a better asset at the end of that.
So where does the RDA thing fit into that kind of a scenario?
Yep. So in an RDA, you'd essentially, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but at the end of that 40-year lease period is when the airport would say, look, we're not going to extend you for 2 10s. We'd give you a 5-year lease extension if it makes sense, if it's not something we immediately need to have. Go ahead, Brian.
And this was the issue, that it was the airport director recommending the RDA. And we're recommending that during the master plan, which we're going to do every 10 years, that has to be approved by the city council. And part of that is which direction you want the airport to go. So the city council will approve an RDA. That would also allow the tenants to come in and present their case on why they should or shouldn't be in an RDA.
Yeah, I know we're out of time, but
we can come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to come back. I think we have some time on the schedule next week in our work session to continue this conversation. And we'll go from there. All right.
Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you, Ryan. We just have a lot more questions, I think, and a lot more that hasn't been answered, and this is a big deal again, once again. We probably shouldn't rush through this one. It's a big change. We have about a few more minutes. Is there any council business? Except, so we do have a hard stop at 6:25 tonight, so we just isn't.
If necessary, we could go to 7.
Okay.
So,
Okay. All right, just kind of get that in the back of your head regardless. Okay, we have a hard stop at 7 or 6:55, I guess. All right, any other questions? All right.
just a reminder, holiday party on Thursday, 6:30, Hug House. And then today's really the last day. If you have comments for outgoing council members, please get those to Eric first thing in the morning.
It's spelled M-A-R. See you in there.